Get comfortable. Settle in, turn the lights down, and let the volume sit wherever it needs to sit so that you can stop paying attention to it. Tonight, we are going somewhere you have already been 100 times without once looking at it properly. Here is what I mean. You have met a caravan trader. You have met dozens of them. A man standing in the middle of a road with 2 animals behind him and a crate at his feet. And you walked up and you opened a menu and you sold him 11 pounds of scrap metal, a broken toaster, and a pistol you did not want. It took 30 seconds. He gave you caps. You took the caps and walked away and never thought about him again. And by the time you were over the next rise, he had already stopped existing. Because that is how it works when you are the one moving through the world instead of living in it. But he did not stop existing. He was still standing there in the road at 4 in the afternoon, with a long walk ahead of him. He had paid for those animals. He had paid for the feed that morning, and he would pay for it again tomorrow. And the man standing 20 feet away with a rifle was not a friend. He was payroll, and the caps he handed you were not his, not entirely, because a share of them belonged to a company clerk in an office 2 days east, who kept a ledger with your trader's name in it and a number beside it that never quite went down. That is the thing about him. He is not a vending machine that happens to have legs. He is a small business. He is inventory and overheads and route debt and a wage bill, walking at the speed of a 2-headed cow across 100 miles of ground where nothing has been repaired properly in 2 centuries. And what he does all day is not adventure. What he does all day is arithmetic, performed while tired, on foot, in the sun. Tonight you are not selling him the toaster. Tonight you are him. Before we start, if this is the sort of thing you like falling asleep to, a subscribe genuinely helps more than you would think. And I always read the comments, even when they arrive at odd hours. Tell me where you are listening from, and what time it is where you are. It is a strange pleasure, reading those at the other end of the day. All right, let us go. It is 2281. The place is the Mojave, the long dry stretch of what used to be the American Southwest, where the roads still run more or less where the pre-war engineers put them. And the cracked concrete has been swept clear 1,000 times by feet rather than machines. This is the year everything in this region is quietly pointed at Hoover Dam. The new California Republic holds it and intends to keep holding it. Something is coming east across the river that intends otherwise. Every soldier you will pass on the road this year is somebody's answer to a question that has not been asked out loud yet. None of that is your problem today. That is the first thing to understand about the life you have just stepped into. Great events are happening about 4 days' walk from where you are standing, and they will affect you mainly through the price of ammunition and the number of checkpoints between here and the next town. Your problem today is smaller and much more immediate. Your problem today is that you are awake at an hour that does not deserve a name, in a walled yard on the outskirts of a settlement. And it is cold, and it will be brutally hot in 6 hours, and neither of those facts is negotiable. You are 31. You've been walking these roads in some capacity since you were 19, first carrying somebody else's load, then guarding somebody else's load. And now, for the last 4 years, carrying your own. You own 2 Brahmin. You own the packs and frames on their backs, a strong box, a repair kit, a rifle you have fired twice, and a route. That last one is the real asset, though it does not look like anything. You know this road. You have walked it 40 times. You know where the water is safe and where it is not. Which of the 4 possible ways around the southern ridge is actually shorter? Which settlement's headman will hold a crate for you overnight, and which one will not? And roughly, what a sealed box of pre-war ammunition should cost in each of 6 places along the way. Nobody can steal that from you, and nobody can copy it quickly. It is the most valuable thing you own, and it lives entirely inside your head. You employ 1 guard. He is asleep about 15 feet from you, or was, and you can hear him not being asleep anymore. And you have a strong box of caps that is not entirely yours, which is a sentence we are going to come back to more than once tonight, because it is the quiet engine underneath everything. Now, here is where people get this wrong, and it is worth getting right early, because it changes the shape of the whole day. The story the Wasteland tells about traders is a story about danger. The trader as the brave one, the man who goes out into the open with everything he owns strapped to an animal, gambling his life against the road. And there is something in that. The road is not safe. Nobody who walks it thinks it is safe. But that framing gets the emphasis exactly backwards. It puts the drama in the rare thing and skips the constant thing. The constant thing is numbers. Consider what actually kills a caravan business. It is almost never the dramatic event. It is that you paid too much for the goods. It is that the Brahmin went lame and you had to buy feed for an animal that was not earning. It is that you arrived at a town 2 days after another trader arrived with the same stock, and the price had collapsed, and you had to sell at a loss or carry it another 80 miles. It is that you extended credit to a settlement that could not pay, because refusing would have cost you the settlement. And now you are financing somebody else's bad year out of your own thin margin. It is that the interest on the animals ran faster than the profit on the route, quietly, for 11 months. And one day, you sat down with the ledger and understood that you had been working for the company the whole time and had simply not noticed. Traders do not go under in a moment. They go under by a percentage point at a time, over about 2 years, while working extremely hard. So the people who last out here are not the bold ones. The bold ones have short careers. The ones who last are, and I mean this precisely, accountants who can read weather. They are cautious to the point of tedium. They count things twice. They walk slower than they want to. They turn down a trade that would clear 400 caps because the route to collect it passes a stretch they do not like the look of this season, and they do not agonize about it. They just do not go. Every instinct they have has been sanded down into a habit of asking what this actually costs. That is the person you are this morning. Hold that. It will make the whole day make sense. The yard is a rectangle of packed dirt with a wall of salvaged sheet metal and cinder block around 3 sides, and the settlement's outer buildings closing the 4th. There is a water trough, a feed store with a real lock on it, and a lamp on a hook that somebody has left burning low all night, which is a small kindness and also a small expense. and you notice both things at once because you cannot stop noticing that sort of thing anymore. It smells like animals and dust and cold metal. In 4 hours, it will smell like animals and dust and hot metal, and the change will happen so gradually that you will not catch the moment it turns. Your Brahmin are standing by the far wall. 2 of them, both heads on each, 4 sets of eyes tracking you without much interest as you cross the yard. They have known you for years. The near one shifts her weight when you come close and makes the low sound they make, which is not a greeting and is not a complaint, and is somewhere between the two. The sound of an animal registering that the day has started and does not intend to argue about it. You put your hand flat on her shoulder in the dark. Warm, steady. That is the first check of the day, and you did it without deciding to. Above the wall, the sky is doing the thing it does about 40 minutes before sunrise out here, where it is not light and is no longer properly dark. And the stars over the eastern ridge have started to thin out one at a time. There is no wind yet. There will be by 9. Somewhere behind you, the guard sits up, coughs once, and starts putting his boots on. Neither of you says good morning. You have never said good morning to each other, and it would be strange to start now. You stand there for a moment longer, with your hand on the animal, doing the arithmetic you always do at this hour, which is not really arithmetic at all, but a kind of inventory of the day. Distance, weight, water, 2 stops, a ledger entry you are not looking forward to, the price of one thing in one town, which you will not know until you get there, and on which more depends than you would like. Then you take your hand off the Brahmin's shoulder, and you go and unlock the feed store, because before anything else on this road can happen, the animals have to eat. The feed store is a converted shipping container with a door that has never once opened smoothly, and you have long since stopped fighting it. You lift as you pull, and it gives, and the smell comes out at you all at once. Dry stalk, dust, something faintly sweet underneath that you have never been able to name. Brahmin feed out here is mostly cut maize stalk, and whatever the growers can spare, pressed and baled and sold by weight. And it is one of the 3 costs that decide whether a trader eats this month. You measure it out by the scoop, not by eye. 4 scoops a head, morning, more than they strictly need on a walking day, and less than they would take if you let them. Overfeeding is not kindness. A Brahmin that eats too much before a long walk goes slow and sullen by mid-morning, and you lose an hour you cannot get back. You learned that the expensive way, once, years ago, and you have never needed to learn it again. While they eat, you go over the harness. This is the part of the morning nobody watching a caravan on the road would ever guess at, because by the time anyone sees you, the straps are already right. You run your hands along each one, from the buckle outward, feeling for the places where the leather has gone stiff, or where a stitch has started to lift. Your fingers know this better than your eyes do. Halfway down the near side girth, there is a spot that has been thinning for 2 months, and you have been telling yourself it will hold. You press it with your thumb. It will hold. Probably 1 more run. Then the crates. You load in a fixed order, and you have never once deviated from it, because in the dark, order is the only inventory system that actually works. Water first, low and centered, because it is heavy, And because if anything goes wrong, you want to be able to reach it without unpacking the world. Then the ammunition, in the flat wooden case with the rope handle, kept separate from everything and lashed tight, because loose rounds shifting inside a load will work their way through a crate wall over 20 miles, and you will find them scattered in the bottom of your pack like spilled teeth. Above that, the medicine. 9 stim packs, the pre-war auto-injector that most of the Wasteland's medicine still runs on, a glass ampule in a steel sleeve with a needle that fires when you press it against skin. 9 is a good number to carry. Fewer, and you have nothing to sell in a settlement that needs them. More, and you are walking around with a small fortune strapped to an animal. And everyone on the road can do that arithmetic as well as you can. Then the scrap electronics, which is the least glamorous and most reliable trade you do. Circuit boards, sensor modules, a cardboard box of vacuum tubes wrapped individually in rag, because a broken tube is worth nothing, and an intact one is worth a day's food. Nobody writes stories about the trader who moved vacuum tubes, but every terminal still running in this half of the Mojave is running because somebody carried a tube 200 miles and did not drop it. And last, at the top, where the weight matters least and the value is highest, the small things. A tin of pre-war coffee, sealed, unopened, which you will not open and will not let anyone else open until the money is on the counter. 2 bars of soap, a hairbrush with all its bristles, a working wristwatch. These weigh almost nothing and sell for almost anything, and they are the reason this run has a margin at all. Then you stop, and you stand back, and you look at the load in the grey light, and you do the thing that is actually your job. You decide what is not going. There is a crate of tools by the wall that you would like to take and are not going to. Good tools, a decent set, worth caps in the right town. But they weigh what 1/3 of a day's water weighs, and water you can sell in any settlement between here and the coast, and tools you can only sell to somebody who is building something. That is the calculation. Not what is valuable. What is valuable per pound, in the place you are going, on the day you arrive. Everything else is a story you tell yourself about a good deal. Let us slow down on the money itself for a moment, because it is stranger than most people who use it ever stop to think about. You are going to spend today acquiring bottle caps, small, ridged, stamped tin discs from soft drink bottles, most of them from a company that has not manufactured anything in 2 centuries. And they function, out here, as real money. You can price a stim pack in them, pay a wage in them, hold a debt in them. This is not a joke the Wasteland is playing on itself. It is a working currency, and it works for a specific and slightly beautiful reason. Money needs 3 things. It has to be hard to fake, it has to be limited, and enough people have to agree on it. Caps clear all 3 by accident. They are hard to fake because making a convincing cap requires a bottling line. The specific dyes, the specific tin gauge, the crimping, and building one of those from scratch costs more than the caps you would produce. The counterfeiter's problem is that the thing is worthless enough that faking it is not worth the setup. Which is a strange sentence, but it is exactly why it holds. They are limited because the supply is finite, and more to the point, shrinking. Nobody is making new ones. every cap in circulation was stamped before the war, or scavenged out of a cellar, or pried off a bottle that survived. And every year, some are lost, buried, dropped in rivers. A currency that slowly disappears is a currency that holds its value, which is the opposite of what most governments manage. And enough people agree on it because of the hub out west a long time ago. The story that gets told is that a water merchant there began backing caps against purified water, a fixed weight of clean water for a fixed number of caps. And once one large trading house does that, the cap stops being a token and becomes a claim. That backing did not last forever. The water merchants moved on, the arrangement dissolved. But by then the habit had set. People kept using caps because everybody else was using caps, which is, if you strip away the ceremony, the only reason any money has ever worked anywhere. So you are carrying money that is valuable, because it cannot be made, and because everyone has agreed to pretend. And if you think that is absurd, consider what you would be carrying instead. Which brings you to the other thing in the strong box. Alongside the caps, folded flat, and kept dry with more care than they are probably worth, there is a small stack of new California Republic paper. Republic dollars, printed money issued by an actual government with an actual treasury, several hundred miles west of where you are standing. Out here, in the Mojave, both are in circulation at once, and that is a genuinely awkward thing to run a business inside of. The Republic's money is backed by the Republic's promise. Not by water, not by scarcity, not by 200 years of habit. By a state saying, this is worth something because we say so, and we have soldiers. Which is exactly how money works in a functioning country. And it works fine, right up until the day people start wondering whether the country is functioning. There was a moment, not so long ago, when the Republic's treasury lost the gold that was meant to sit underneath all that paper. What was left afterward was paper backed by confidence. You watch the exchange rate the way a farmer watches weather. In the towns closest to Republic territory, the paper trades near enough to face value, and nobody blinks. Out east, closer to the river, it trades low, and you can feel a merchant's opinion of the whole new California project in what he offers you for a note. Some places will not take it at all. Not out of politics, just out of an unwillingness to hold something they might not be able to spend. So you carry both. You quote in caps because caps are what everyone understands. You accept paper where the discount is small enough to live with. And you convert when the rate looks kind. And you are wrong about that rate perhaps one time in 4. A trader who only takes caps loses every sale to a soldier with a month's wages in his pocket. A trader who takes paper indiscriminately can wake up one morning holding a fistful of somebody's opinion. Nobody teaches you this. You learn it by losing money. The Brahmin have finished eating. You can tell without looking by the change in the sound of the yard. You go back to the load and make the last decision, which is always the same last decision. There is a spare pack frame that you could strap across the top of the second animal's load. It would ride badly. It would need retying twice a day. And if the frame you are using cracks somewhere past the second waypoint, you would give a great deal to have it. You leave it. You have left it every run for a year, and the frames have held every run for a year. And you are aware, in the way you are aware of a sound in a wall, that this is not a decision so much as a bet you keep replacing. The guard comes across the yard with his coat on and his water already filled. And he looks at the load, and he looks at you, and he nods once. That is his professional opinion. It is balanced. He would tell you if it were not. You check the strong box one last time. The small, dull weight of it against your hip, heavier than it looks, and not, if you are honest with yourself, entirely yours. There is a percentage of what is in there that belongs to a company, and a percentage that belongs to a loan on the animals, and a percentage that will belong to the man standing beside you by nightfall. Whatever is left after all of that is your wage for the day, and you will not know what it is until you count it in a bunk 12 hours from now. Then you throw the bar on the yard gate and swing it back, and the road is right there, pale and empty, and already visible in the growing light, running out east between the rocks, the way it has run since before anyone alive was born. The near Brahmin walks through first, without being told. She always does. She sets the pace, and the pace is not yours. This is the first thing a new trader gets wrong, and it is the thing that separates a man who will still be doing this in 10 years from a man who will be doing something else by autumn. You want to walk faster. Your legs are fresh, the air is cold, the light is coming up clean over the rocks, and every part of you that is still young wants to put distance behind you while the walking is easy. And the Brahmin walks at the speed a Brahmin walks, which is a little under 3 miles in an hour, and will not be argued with, and will punish you for a week if you try. So you fall in beside her shoulder, and you shorten your stride, and you let her set it. The load creaks. Her hooves come down flat and unhurried on packed dirt that has been packed by exactly this, by animals walking at exactly this speed, for longer than the road has had a name in anyone's memory. There is a discipline in not hurrying that nobody tells you about beforehand. It has to be learned in the body. The route takes what it takes. Pushing the animals on the first morning buys you an hour that you will pay back with interest on the 3rd afternoon, when the near one starts favoring a foot, and you have to stop and look at it and find nothing wrong except tiredness, which is the one thing you cannot repair with wire. Behind you, the yard gate is still open. Nobody will close it until the second caravan pulls out. You do not look back at it. The guard has drifted, without either of you saying anything, up onto the high side of the road, the side where the ground rises into broken rock and scrub. You are on the low side, walking with the load between you and the open ground, which means the load is between you and most of what could come at either of you, and the guard's eyes are up on the ridgeline, and the cuts, and the places where the rock folds over on itself. Neither of you decided this. It is the arrangement that every pair on every road in this part of the world falls into within about half an hour of walking together, because it is the arrangement that works. His attention goes up and out. Your attention goes down and close, onto the straps, onto the animals, onto the surface of the road, onto the small, constant business of the load staying a load. You are watching different distances. If you both watched the same one of those distances would go unwatched, and it is the unwatched distance that costs a caravan its cargo. You will not talk much for the first 2 hours. That is also arrangement rather than decision. Conversation is for the flats, where the sightlines are long and nothing needs to be listened for. Here is something worth slowing down for, because it looks like inefficiency, and is nothing of the kind. Look at where this road goes. It goes east, but it does not go east in a line. It swings north for the better part of 2 miles around the base of a hill it could plainly climb over. It bends south again to cross a wash at a point that is no shallower than 3 other points you will pass. It ignores an entire stretch of open flat ground that any reasonable person, standing at the yard gate with a map, would walk straight across. The shortest line between 2 settlements is never the line anyone walks. It never is, anywhere, and the reasons stack up on each other until the crooked line is simply the correct one. Some of it is the animals. A Brahmin carrying 400 pounds does not climb a grade the way an unloaded person does. A slope you would take without thinking costs the animal 3 times the effort of walking twice as far around. And effort is feed, and feed is caps. So the road goes around. Some of it is water. The bend south to that particular crossing is because 200 yards upstream there is a seep that has not failed in living memory, and a road that passes within reach of reliable water is worth several miles of detour. Some of it is sightlines. That stretch of open flat is open in both directions, which sounds like an advantage, and is not, when you are the slowest thing on it and visible from 4 miles away. And some of it, honestly, is that a route is a thing you inherit rather than a thing you design. That is the part people underestimate. Nobody sat down and worked this road out. It accreted. Somebody walked it badly, and somebody else walked it slightly less badly, and 100 years of small corrections settled into a line that no one person ever knew the whole reasoning for. When an older trader taught you this route, he did not explain why it bends north around the hill. He simply bent north around the hill, and you bent north with him. And by the 4th run, you were bending north without noticing. And that is how the knowledge moves. It lives in feet. Ask a trader why the road goes where it goes, and he will very often be unable to tell you, and be entirely right about where it goes. Which means the route is a form of property. It is the most valuable thing you own, and it does not appear in the strong box, and it cannot be stolen, and it cannot be sold, and it will be worth nothing at all to you the day you have to walk somewhere else. The sun comes up properly around the 2nd bend, and the cold goes out of the air faster than seems reasonable. You loosen your coat without stopping. Ahead, the horizon does a thing you have been half watching since the gate. There is haze sitting low over the flats to the northeast, and it has thickened slightly in the last 20 minutes. And the question is whether it is haze or whether it is dust with something behind it. You can tell the difference, mostly. Haze sits still, and its top edge is soft, and it does not have a color. Dust moves, and it moves in a direction, and it has an edge on the leading side that looks sharper than it should. And when the light gets behind it, it goes faintly orange in a way that ordinary morning air does not. Real weather, the kind with rads riding in it, announces itself further out than that, in the sky above the dust rather than in the dust. A flat brownish ceiling that makes the light go strange and the shadows go weak. This is soft-topped and colorless, and it has not moved in 20 minutes. It is haze. It will burn off before midday. You keep walking. That is the whole of it. That is what reading weather actually amounts to on a road. Not dramatic decisions, but 100 small non-decisions, each one taking 4 seconds, each one ending with the walk continuing. The day you make a real decision about weather is the day it has already gone wrong. Around 9, the guard slows without stopping, and you feel it more than see it, the way you feel a change in the rhythm of the hooves. There is something on the ridge on the high side, a shape that is either a rock formation or is not, about 600 yards up and ahead, sitting in a fold where a person watching a road would sit if a person were watching a road. Neither of you says anything for a while. He is looking at it, and you are looking at the near Brahmin's ears, because the animals will often tell you before your eyes will. Her ears are forward and untroubled, and she is chewing at nothing the way she does. You keep the pace. That is the decision, and it is nearly always the decision. You do not hurry, because hurrying tells anyone watching that you have seen them, and that you are worth watching. You do not stop, because stopping is worse. You walk at the pace of a Brahmin carrying 400 pounds along a road she has walked 40 times, and you let the fold in the rock pass behind your right shoulder. And after 4 or 5 minutes, the guard's shoulders come down half an inch, and he drifts back down toward the road. And that is the end of it. It was rock. It is almost always rock. It is rock enough of the time that a trader who stopped for every fold in a ridge would never arrive anywhere, and not rock rarely enough that a trader who never looked would not last 2 seasons. You live in the space between those 2 facts, all day, every day, and the cost of it is not fear. It is fatigue. Attention is a thing that runs out like water, and you spend it at a steady rate from the moment the gate opens, and by evening you will be tired in a way that has nothing to do with your legs. Nobody warns you about that either. Mid-morning, you halt. Not because you need to, but because the schedule says so. And the schedule was written by people who understood that need is a poor guide to rationing. The animals get pulled off the road onto a bit of hard shoulder, where nothing grows and nothing can hide. The guard checks the straps on the far one while you get the water out. You measure it by the cup. This is the detail that visitors never quite believe. You have water, more water on the 2 animals than most of the households you will pass today have in their entire dwelling. And you pour it into a tin cup with a line scratched inside it, and you drink exactly that. And then you fill it once more for the guard and hand it across, and then the lid goes back on. Not because you are short, because the arithmetic of a route is done in advance, and the advance is the only place it can be done. Water you drink today because you were thirsty is water you do not have on the 4th afternoon when a detour puts you 11 hours further from a seep than you planned to be. Every trader who has ever died of thirst on a road did it with a perfectly reasonable sequence of individually sensible drinks behind him. So you drink the cup. It is not enough. It is meant to be not enough. Then the lid, and the strap, and the near Brahmin lifting her heads and turning back toward the road before you have finished, because she knows this halt, and she knows how long it lasts, and she is, in her way, also keeping the schedule. You step back into the pace beside her shoulder. The haze on the flats is already thinning. There are 4 hours to the waypoint. The near Brahmin stops walking about 40 minutes later, and she does not tell you why. There is no injury in it. You watch her legs first, because that is the fear, and the legs are fine. She has simply planted herself on the road with all 4 feet arranged like she means to stay, and both heads are turned slightly leftward toward a stretch of pale ground where there is nothing at all to look at, and the rest of her is doing nothing. The other one keeps going for 6 or 7 steps before she notices she is alone, and then she stops too and looks back. And now you have 2 animals stopped on a road with a schedule attached to them. You do not pull the lead. That is the first thing anyone teaches you, and the last thing anyone learns. A Brahmin at rest weighs somewhere well past 1,000 pounds and is built low, and the only outcome of hauling on her head when she has decided otherwise is that you learn something about your own shoulder. There is no version of this where you win by force. There is no version of this where anyone has ever won by force. So you go to her head, both of them, and put a hand flat on the near one's neck, where the hide is thick and dusty and warm, and you stand there, and you wait. The guard has already stepped off the road to the high side and taken up a position where he can see the pale ground she is looking at. And after a moment he says it is nothing, which means he can see it is nothing, and she cannot, or she can, and it is not nothing to her. And there is no way to settle the disagreement in a language you both speak. You give her a minute. Then you walk her forward 2 steps by walking forward yourself with your hand still on her, so that the movement is something you are doing together rather than something you are doing to her. And she comes reluctantly and stops again. This takes half an hour, not 5 minutes. Half an hour, standing in the sun on a road with the load creaking every time she shifts, doing nothing that would look to an observer like work. It is work. It is the single most important work you will do today, and it will not appear anywhere in tonight's ledger. And if you got it wrong, it would appear in every ledger you write for the next 2 years. Let me put a number on that, because the number is the whole reason you are standing here being patient with an animal. A Brahmin, a healthy adult, broken to the pack, not obviously lame, not obviously old, trades in the Mojave for a sum that would buy you several hundred stim packs. It is the largest single purchase most traders ever make, and the only one they make on credit. You did not buy these 2 outright. Nobody buys them outright. You are, in a very real sense, walking beside 2 enormous pieces of collateral, and the entity that actually owns the outstanding balance is a company with an office and a clerk and a book. Everything you own that matters is standing in the road, refusing to move for reasons of her own. And here is the thing about the arithmetic that a scavenger with a backpack never has to think about. Carrying capacity is the whole business. A person on foot with a good frame can move perhaps 80 or 90 pounds over distance, day after day, and stay upright. That is enough to be a scavenger. It is not enough to be a trader, because the margin on scrap is thin enough that 80 pounds of it, sold perfectly, will not feed the person who carried it, plus buy the next 80 pounds, plus leave anything over. 2 Brahmin move something like 15 or 20 times that. Same road, same days, same water, more or less, though not exactly, and we will come to that. The animals do not multiply your labor. They multiply your inventory, and inventory is where the entire profit lives, because the cost of walking a road is nearly fixed no matter what you walk it with. The road takes 6 days, whether you are carrying 90 pounds or 1,400. The guard costs the same either way. Your own food and water cost the same either way. So the Brahmin are not transport. The Brahmin are the reason there is a business, which is also why she can end it. Feed is the daily proof of this. Brahmin will eat a great deal of what grows out here, which is the only reason wasteland ranching functions at all. The thin scrub, the tough grasses, the agave, and the woody stuff that would kill anything with a more delicate arrangement inside it. They are slow, patient converters of ground that human beings cannot eat. That is their gift, and it is not a small one. But on a working route, there is often nothing to graze, or there is grazing, but it belongs to somebody, or it looks fine and is not, and so you carry feed. Baled and pressed, bought in a town, priced by the ranchers, who know precisely how much leverage they hold on the day you arrive short. Feed weighs. Feed occupies space that could have been carrying cargo. Every pound of feed on a Brahmin's back is a pound of paid freight that is not on her back, which means the animal's own upkeep is quietly eating the margin she exists to create. That balance, grazing where you can, carried feed where you must, and the route planned partly around where the two swap over, is one of the real crafts of this trade, and nobody outside it has ever heard of it. Water is the same story, worse. She drinks a great deal more than you do. Any honest accounting of a route's water is mostly an accounting of what the animals need, with the humans as a rounding error attached. And she can die. Not dramatically. That is the part people misunderstand. A Brahmin does not usually end in some sudden event on the road. She goes lame. She eats something wrong at a stop and is off her feed for 3 days. She develops a slow limp on the near side that gets slightly worse each morning until the arithmetic tips, and you are walking an animal that costs more to keep than she can carry. Then you sell her at whatever the buyer feels like offering, because the buyer can see the limp too, and you still owe the balance on her, and you go on with one animal and a route designed for 2. That is how traders end. Not out here. In a ledger, over about 4 months, quietly. So you stand in the road with your hand on her neck for half an hour, because 30 minutes is very cheap, and she is not. She moves eventually. There is no moment where she decides. There is a moment where you notice that she has been walking for some seconds already, and the other one has fallen in behind, and the road is passing underfoot again as if none of it happened. Something worth sitting with, while the pace re-establishes itself. This ground was ranched before, not in the way you are doing it, not animals as freight, but ranched properly, at a scale that is difficult to hold in the head. Cattle here numbered in the tens of thousands. They were bred for weight and for docility, and for the speed at which they put meat on, and they were moved by truck rather than walked, and they were owned by companies with names on stationery, and they ate grain that was grown somewhere else entirely, and hauled here by a system so reliable that nobody who used it ever thought about it once. You pass the evidence of this several times a day, and mostly do not register it. Fence posts. That is what is left. Lines of grey wood standing at intervals across ground where the wire came off decades ago and went into somebody's repairs. And the posts stayed because a post buried in this soil has very little reason to fall over. They run for miles. They enclose nothing. They are a boundary around an idea that no longer exists, drawn by people who were confident enough about the future to sink timber into the earth at regular intervals. And there are stretches out here where you can follow that line with your eye all the way to where the heat takes it. Those animals had veterinarians. That is the detail that does something to you if you let it. There were people whose entire profession was the health of cattle, with instruments and training and supply. And when an animal went lame, there was a thing to be done about it that was not simply watching and hoping and knowing what it will mean in 4 months. You have a hand, an eye, some grease, a knowledge of how she walks when she is right, and the flats of both palms. The pale ground she was staring at goes by on the left. There is nothing there. There was probably never anything there. You will not know. 2 hours on, the load has shifted. It always shifts after a stop, because the animals resettle themselves under it, and the straps take up differently. And you can hear it before you can see it, a slight change in the creak on the offside. So you halt again, briefly, and this time it is the ordinary kind of halt, and you work along the near flank with your fingers under the webbing, feeling for the tight spots and the slack ones. A load that rides badly does not fail on the day it starts riding badly. It rubs. It takes a week to open a saw under a strap where you cannot see it. And then you have an animal that cannot be loaded on a route that requires her to be loaded. So you undo 2 straps, shift a crate about the width of your hand toward the rear, and draw everything up again. 4 minutes. Your shoulders are already complaining, and it is not yet noon. That ache sits high between the blades and comes from reaching upward across an animal's back, over and over, in a way no other work quite reproduces. Then back to her head, a hand on the warm, dusty neck, a word she does not understand, and responds to anyway. And the road, again, and the pace that is hers, rather than yours, and the waypoint somewhere ahead, where none of this will be visible to anyone. You see the settlement before you smell it, which is unusual, and only because the land here rises just enough to give you a half-mile of warning. 4 buildings and a wall. The wall is the honest description of the place. Everything else about it is negotiable, but the wall tells you what the people inside think of the road you are standing on. It is a low thing, waist-high in places, chest-high where they had more sheet metal, and it does not enclose anything so much as suggest an edge. There is a gate that is really a gap with a frame around it. Someone sits near it in the shade of a lean-to and has been watching you for the last 20 minutes, and you have known that for the last 20 minutes, and both of you have been comfortable with the arrangement. You stop while you are still well short. This is the part nobody tells you about, and everybody expects. You stop, you take your hand off the lead, you step out from behind the animals so that your whole shape is visible, and you wait. Not long, long enough that the person in the shade can see you have chosen to be seen. Then you raise a hand, not a wave, just an open palm at about shoulder height, and hold it a moment, and let it fall. A settlement of 30 people cannot afford to guess. Everything about approaching one is designed to remove the need for guessing. You come in slow, from the direction people come from, with your hands where they can be read, and you make the last 100 yards take longer than they need to. It costs you 3 minutes. It costs the person in the shade nothing at all, which is the whole point. The hand goes up in return. You pick up the lead and walk in. Inside the wall, the ground has been swept, which is the first thing you notice about any settlement that intends to keep existing. A place that sweeps has decided it is a place. There is a cistern under a tarpaulin roof, a generator shed with a pipe running out of it, a long building that is probably where most of them sleep, and a patch of worked ground that is doing better than it has any right to. 2 children look at the Brahmin the way children have always looked at large animals, from behind an adult's leg, entirely certain that this time they will be allowed to touch it. Your guard stops just inside the gate, sets her back against the wall where she can see both the gap and you, and does not follow you further in. That is correct. A guard who wanders a settlement is a guard who is not guarding, and worse, a guard who looks like she is counting things. Setting up is a ritual, and like most rituals, it exists because doing it in the wrong order costs money. The near Brahmin gets tied first, loosely in shade if there is shade, and the water she is offered comes out of your supply and not theirs. You will pay for what she drinks here later, or you will be quietly resented for it, and resentment is more expensive than water. Then the offside crate comes down and turns over, and that crate is now a counter. It is a counter because you have put it in a place where the light falls on it, and where anyone crossing the swept ground has to see it without having to walk toward it. Then you lay out. There is an order to laying out, and it is not the order of value. The cheap, useful things go at the front edge, near enough to touch. Wire, tape, a coil of salvaged cabling, a tin of nails. People pick those up without deciding to, and a hand that has already picked something up is a hand that is halfway to a trade. Behind them, the middle ground, the things that are the real business. Purified water in sealed containers, ammunition sorted by caliber into 3 shallow tins, a bundle of clean cloth, and at eye level, propped so it catches whatever sun there is, the thing that will probably not sell today at all. Today it is a pre-war lighter, brass, with the enamel still on it. It weighs almost nothing. You paid very little for it. It will sit on that crate at eye level for the whole of your stop, and 4 people will look at it, and one of them will pick it up and turn it over and put it down again, with an expression you have seen 1,000 times, and then that person will buy the wire. That is what the expensive thing at eye level is for. It is not stock. It is the top of a ladder that makes everything below it look like the sensible choice. A tin of nails next to nothing is a tin of nails. A tin of nails next to a brass lighter is a bargain, and neither of you will ever say so out loud. Here is the part of this work that people who have never done it get most wrong. They imagine that pricing is a thing you do slowly, with thought, weighing what a thing is worth. It is not. You price in about 4 seconds, and the 4 seconds are not spent on the object. They are spent on the person. You are not asking what this coil of wire is worth. You know that. You have known that since you loaded it. What you are asking in the time it takes them to cross the swept ground and put a hand on your counter, is a different question entirely. What does this person need? What do they want? And which of the two do they think they are here for? Need is visible. Need walks straight to the thing, does not look at anything else, and asks the price in a flat voice. Need has already decided, and is only finding out how much it will hurt. You do not raise the price on need. That is the whole of the ethics of this trade, and it is also, plainly, the arithmetic of it. A settlement that is squeezed on a thing it cannot do without is a settlement that will remember you, and there are only so many settlements on this road, and you intend to walk it again next month, and the month after that. Want is different. Want circles. Want picks up 3 things it is not going to buy before it touches the one it will. Want asks about the lighter. You can price want with a wider hand because want is a negotiation. Both parties are enjoying, and both of you know it is a game. And the price at the end of it is the price of having played. The third case is the one that requires actual care. The person who has come to you needing something and has decided, out of pride, to present as wanting it. That is most people, most of the time. Reading that correctly, and letting them keep the posture, while you quietly give them the price you were going to give need anyway, is the closest thing this work has to a skill you could not teach in an afternoon. And then there is the margin, which is the number that nobody outside the trade ever thinks about. Say you sell a coil of wire for 40 caps. Set aside for a moment that most of what happens on this crate today will not involve caps at all. 40 caps sounds like 40 caps. It is not. Out of it comes what you paid for the wire, which was not nothing. Out of it comes feed, which is a daily cost that continues whether you sell anything or not, and which 2 animals convert into walking at a rate you have calculated more times than is healthy. Out of it comes your guard's day wage, which is fixed and owed regardless of takings. Out of it comes the percentage on the route, which we will come to this evening, because it deserves its own accounting, and it is the single largest thing standing between you and the word independent. What is left is yours. It is not 1/10 of the 40. It is not 1/5. On a good line, on good stock, in a settlement that needs what you brought, it is somewhere in the region of 1/4, and 1/4 of 40 is 10. And 10 caps is roughly what a person here would think of as loose change. You do this 200 times a day, and you eat. The first real trade of the stop involves no caps whatsoever. A man in his 50s, hands like a mechanic's, brings you a circuit board out of a terminal casing. It is intact. The solder is unbroken, and the contacts are clean, and someone has stored it wrapped in cloth, which tells you he knew what he had. He wants food for it, not caps food, which means the settlement's stores are thinner than the swept ground suggests. You turn the board over twice. 3 days of dried meal and a tin of preserved Brahmin is what you offer. He counters at 5 days. You settle at 4, and you are both content, because he knows a working board is worth more than that in a city, and you know the city is 9 days' walk from here, and he is not going to walk it. That is the whole of the trade in one exchange. Distance is the commodity. You are not selling goods. You are selling the fact that you were willing to be somewhere else. Another comes, and another. Scrap for water, mostly. A woman buys the nails and asks after a specific gauge of pipe you do not have and will have next month. And you write it in your head where you write such things, because a request remembered is a sale already made. And through all of it, at the far end of the swept ground, the settlement's own water seller sits at her tap under the tarpaulin and sells the same commodity you are selling at a price you cannot approach. She is not doing anything clever. She has a cistern and a pipe and the whole of the local supply, and you have what you could carry on the backs of 2 animals across 4 days of road. And the difference between those 2 positions is not skill or nerve or shrewdness. It is infrastructure. She nods to you when you catch her eye, perfectly pleasant, and you nod back. Neither of you says a word about it. Both of you have known since you walked through the gate exactly how this part of the day would go. And both of you understand that the reason her price is better has nothing whatsoever to do with either of you. By midday, the sun has come over the top of the wall, and the swept ground has gone from cool to unpleasant, and the trading thins the way it always thins, not because people have stopped wanting things, but because they have gone to eat. Someone calls you over. This is not optional, though nobody would ever say so. The settlement eats together, or near enough. There is a long table under a stretch of corrugated roofing on the shaded side of the yard, and a pot, and a woman who has been standing over the pot since before you arrived. What comes out of it is a stew of Brahmin meat, and something starchy, and a great deal of water. And there are flatbreads that have been cooked on a sheet of metal over coals. And there is a bowl set down in front of you before you have decided anything at all. You pay for it. Not at the table, and not in front of anyone. Later, when the meal is done, and the bowls are going back, you find the woman who cooked, and you put caps in her hand, and she takes them without comment. 12 of them, which is more than the meal was worth, by any accounting you could defend in a ledger. Here is why you do that, and it is worth being clear about, because the arithmetic is not obvious. You are eating out of your own margin. Nothing about this meal is recovered anywhere. It is a straight loss against the day, and you take that loss deliberately. Every stop, every route, without exception, because the alternative costs more. Consider what refusing looks like from the other side of the table. You come through the gate with 2 animals and a strongbox and a guard. You sell to them. You take their caps and their scrap and their labor hours in traded goods. And then, when the pot comes out, you sit apart with your own food and eat what you brought. Nobody would say anything. Nobody would need to. It would simply be understood, quietly and permanently, that you were a man who arrived, extracted, and departed, and that you did not consider yourself to be of the same kind as the people you extracted from. The next time you came through, the prices would be a little harder. Not much. Enough. And the request for that gauge of pipe would go to somebody else's ear. So you eat the stew. You eat it visibly, and you eat a second bowl if a second bowl is offered. And you say it is good, and it is good, and the 12 caps go into the cook's hand later where the transaction is invisible, and the meal remains a meal rather than a purchase. That distinction is not sentimental. It is the most efficient money you spend all day. And then, over the bowl, you begin the other half of your work. The goods on the Brahmin are one part of what you carry. The other part is in your head, and it does not weigh anything. and there are days when it is worth more than the load. They want to know about the road. Which stretch is passable, where the washout is, whether the culvert south of the ridge has finally gone. They want to know what things cost 4 days from here. They want to know whether anyone has seen the Republic's patrols moving, and in which direction, and how many. They want to know who is buying scrap electronics this season, and who has stopped. They want to know whether the caravan out of the north came through, because it was due 11 days ago, and it has not. You tell them, freely, accurately, at length. You do not charge for any of it. Let this one sit for a moment, because it explains more about how the wasteland actually functions than almost anything else you could examine. There is no telegraph. There is no post. There are radio transmitters, and there are people who own them, and the number of settlements that can afford both a working set and the power to run it is small enough that you could name them. For the enormous majority of places where people live and trade, information moves at exactly the speed a person can walk, which means it moves at your speed. It moves as you. Every trader on every route is a packet of news, and the network of trade routes is also, and simultaneously, the only communications network that exists. Prices propagate this way. A shortage in a market town does not announce itself. It becomes visible when the price rises, and the price is observed by whoever is standing in that market. And that person walks 4 days and mentions it over a stew, and someone in the stew audience adjusts what they plant, or what they hold back, or what they ask for. By the time the information has crossed 3 settlements, it is a week old and slightly wrong, and everybody knows it is a week old and slightly wrong, and they discount it accordingly. Everyone in this trade is making decisions on stale data, and everyone knows the data is stale, and the whole system works anyway, because stale is enormously better than nothing. Now the part that makes it hold together. A trader who lies about the road is finished. Not disciplined, not fined. Finished. Say you tell them the southern culvert is sound, because you would rather they sent their own small trade that way, and left the northern buyers to you. 2 of them go south. The culvert is not sound. They lose a day, or a load, or an animal. They will remember your face for the rest of your working life, and so will everyone they tell. And the telling costs them nothing, and travels along precisely the same routes you do. You cannot outrun it, because it moves at your speed. There is no city large enough to hide in, and no route long enough to get ahead of it. So the honesty is not a virtue. It is structural. The system has produced a set of traders who tell the truth about road conditions with real reliability, and it has done so without a court, a contract, a license, or a single person in authority anywhere, purely because the cost of being caught is total, and the mechanism of being caught is the same mechanism that feeds you. Which is why you also tell them about the caravan from the north that is 11 days overdue, and you tell them plainly, without embroidery and without speculation. That is a fact, and it belongs to everyone. What it means is not yours to decide over a bowl of stew. The talk moves on. It usually does. Your guard eats at the other end of the table. Not far. 6 places down, in easy sight, in conversation with 2 of the settlement's own. He has his bowl, and he is fine, and nothing at all is wrong. But he is down there, and you are up here, and neither of you arranged it. It is the wage. It is only ever the wage. You pay him by the day, at a rate that is decent and that you would defend to anyone. And out of that rate he covers his own ammunition and his own boots and his own everything else. He works for you, not with you. And there is a particular awkwardness in paying a person to stand near you all day and be alert on your behalf, and then sitting down beside him to eat as though the arrangement were a friendship. The awkwardness would be yours, mostly. He has done this longer than you have owned Brahmin. He has walked for 4 companies and a dozen independents, and he knows what the position is, and he has no interest in pretending it is something else in order to make an employer feel better about the shape of it. Sitting 6 places down is not a rebuke. It is simply him declining to do unpaid emotional labor at midday, which is a reasonable position for a man to take. So you let it be. You do not call him up. You do not perform a closeness that would be for your comfort rather than his. What you do instead is what actually counts. You pay him on time. You pay him in full. You pay him where people can see it. And you do not ask him to do a single thing that was not in the arrangement when he agreed to it. That is the whole of what a guard is owed, and it is more than a great many of them get. He catches your eye down the table and lifts his bowl half an inch, and you lift yours, and that is the entire exchange, and it is sufficient for both of you. The bowls go back, the pot is scraped. The shade under the corrugated roof begins to lose its argument with the angle of the sun, and people start standing up in 1s and 2s to get back to whatever the afternoon requires of them. You pack the crate that was a counter. The goods that did not sell go back into the packs, in the order they came out, which is the reverse of the order you will want them in tomorrow. So you spend a few minutes fixing that now, rather than discovering it in the dark. The nails are gone. Most of the wire is gone. You have 4 days of food you did not have this morning. A jug of water off the settlement's tap at the settlement's price, and a request for pipe of a particular gauge that you will fill next month and be paid well for. The Brahmin have been watered and are unhappy about being roped up again, and express this in the way Brahmin do, which is by becoming approximately twice as heavy without moving. Your guard reappears at the animals' heads without being asked, because that is the arrangement, and the 2 of you get the load settled between you in under 10 minutes. The next leg is the long one. 4 hours if the ground is good, more if it is not, and it ends at a company way station where a ledger is waiting with your name in it. You know the ground. You know roughly what the ledger will say. Neither piece of knowledge makes the walking shorter. Someone opens the gate. You go through it into the flat white light of the early afternoon, and the settlement's noise falls away behind you within about 30 paces, the way it always does, faster than seems reasonable for a place you have just spent 3 hours inside. The road out of the settlement runs level for a while, and then stops pretending. It rises through a broken shelf of ground, where the old surface has heaved and cracked, and the packs begin to work against their frames, the way they always do on uneven footing. A small shifting that you feel through the lead rope before you hear it. You hear it about an hour later. A sound like a knuckle popping, low and dry, from the near Brahmin's left side. You stop the animals. You do not hurry. Hurrying at this stage is how a cracked frame becomes a spilled load, and a spilled load on a slope is an afternoon you will not get back. The frame has split along the upright, just above where the lower strap crosses it. It is a wooden frame, which is what most of them are, because wood can be worked with a knife, and metal generally cannot be worked with anything you carry. The split runs about a hand's length, and it has not gone through. If you leave it, it will go through, probably in the next hour, probably on a downhill. So you unload that side, crates off, laid in the dirt in the order you will put them back. The Brahmin stands there with the sudden lightness of a creature that has decided this is now a rest and cannot be persuaded otherwise. The repair is wire, a splint of scrap board off the underside of a crate lid, and about 20 minutes. You cut the wire with a pair of pliers whose jaws have been reground so many times they meet crooked. You wrap the splint tight against the upright, 4 turns, twist the ends flat so nothing catches a strap, and then you wrap it again lower down, because 1 wrap is a repair, and 2 wraps is a repair you can stop thinking about. Your guard watches the ridge while you do it. Not because anything is on the ridge, because that is what the second person is for when the first person's hands are busy. The pliers are older than you are. That is worth sitting with for a moment, because it explains a great deal about how this world actually works. Almost nothing you own was made after the war. Almost nothing anyone owns was. There are places that manufacture. The gun runners turn out ammunition and weapons at a real industrial rate, and there are workshops in the bigger settlements that can cast and forge. But the sheer volume of ordinary objects in circulation is inherited. Pots, buckets, screwdrivers, bolts. The world is running on the accumulated inventory of a civilization that made an enormous amount of stuff and then stopped. Which means the survival rate of an object has almost nothing to do with how valuable it was, and almost everything to do with how simple it is. A screwdriver is a rod of steel with a handle. Nothing on it can fail except the tip, and the tip can be reground. 200 years later, it is still a screwdriver. A rifle is a machine with springs and a firing pin, and tolerances measured in fractions of a millimeter. And every one of those parts has a lifespan. Rifles keep working because people cannibalize 3 to keep 1 alive. Screwdrivers just keep working. You can price this. A good screwdriver moves for maybe 20 caps, and it moves fast because everyone needs one and nobody can make one. A cracked rifle receiver is worth its weight as scrap, which is to say almost nothing, and it will sit in your pack for 4 months. Under every salvaged object, there is a hidden column of labor. Someone walked into a ruin. Someone carried it out. Someone cleaned 200 years of dust and rust off it, decided it was sound, and traded it on. By the time it reaches your hand, it has passed through 3 or 4 people who each took a margin, and the price reflects all of that walking. That is what you are actually paying for when you buy a bucket. Not the bucket. The distance. You get the crates back on. The frame holds. It will hold for weeks, and then one day it will not, and you will build a new one out of whatever is at hand, and that one will also last longer than seems reasonable. The water comes out at the top of the rise. You have 3 containers on this run. The jug you bought this morning, a canteen on your own belt, and a sealed pre-war bottle in the pack that is stock, not supply, and will not be drunk unless something has gone badly wrong. Your guard carries their own, which is their business. though you know roughly how much is in it, because you would be a fool not to. You pour by the cup, not because you are dramatic about it, but because pouring from a jug into a mouth wastes more than anyone believes until they measure it. A cup, twice, at the halt. The Brahmin get theirs from the shallow trough you unfold from the pack, and they get considerably more than you do, because they are carrying the load, and because they represent most of the capital you own. Here is the thing about water in the wasteland that people who have never had to carry it get wrong. The problem is almost never finding some. There is water in a great many places. There are cisterns, tanks, springs, the river when you are near it, and puddles after weather. The problem is that most of it will make you sick. Some of it is radioactive, and the two problems have completely different solutions that people constantly confuse. Boiling is for the living things in the water. Bacteria, parasites, the ordinary pre-war problems that have never gone away. Boil it properly and hold it there, and you have dealt with all of that. It costs you fuel and time, and in open country, fuel is the harder of the two. Boiling does absolutely nothing about radiation. You can boil a cup of contaminated water down to half a cup, and all you have done is concentrate what was in it. Anyone who tells you otherwise has been lucky rather than right, and their luck is not transferable. For radiation, you need distance, dilution, or a purifier. And real purifiers are pre-war machines that a settlement owns and guards and charges for. This is precisely why purified water is a currency-grade commodity, and always has been. It is not that clean water is rare in the abstract. It is that clean water is manufactured by devices nobody can build anymore, in places you have to walk to, which is why you paid what you paid this morning without arguing, and why the settlement's water seller did not blink. You carry a rad counter. Almost every trader does, in one form or another. Either the counter built into a wrist unit, if you are lucky enough to have one, or a separate box with a needle and a speaker that has been repaired so often the case is more tape than case. Yours ticks quietly all day. That is normal. The background out here is not zero, and has not been for 2 centuries. You are not listening for ticks. You are listening for the rate of change. That is the whole skill. A steady click that has been the same for 3 hours tells you nothing except that the world is the world. A click that doubles over 200 paces tells you that you are walking into something, and the useful information is not how bad it is where you stand. It is which direction makes it worse. You take 4 steps left and listen. 4 steps right and listen. You are triangulating, badly and slowly, and it works. An hour past the rise, it climbs. Not alarmingly. It goes from the background mutter to something with a shape to it. A faster patter that keeps on being faster after you have walked far enough that it should have settled. Ahead and slightly north, the ground drops into a shallow basin where something metallic and large is lying half buried, and it does not matter what it is. It has been there a long time, and it is the reason the needle is moving. The road goes through the basin. Of course it does. The road was surveyed before any of this mattered. The detour is up and around the eastern lip, over ground that is worse for the animals, and adds, you estimate, and your estimate is usually close, 2 hours. You take the 2 hours. That is not courage or caution. That is arithmetic. 2 hours costs you a late arrival, a worse price at the evening market, and a stiff back. Walking a loaded caravan through a hot basin costs you a dose you cannot see, cannot undo, and will carry for the rest of a career that depends entirely on your ability to keep walking. Every trader on this road knows somebody who made the fast choice enough times, and every one of those people is now doing something else for a living, if they are doing anything. The detour is ugly. Loose stone, a slope the Brahmin dislike, one stretch where you lead them one at a time. The counter falls back into its mutter within a few hundred paces of the lip, which is the confirmation you wanted and did not entirely trust until you heard it. And then, coming off the far side, the light changes. It goes flat and slightly yellow. The air stops moving, then starts again from a different direction, which is the part that actually matters. To the west, low down and wide, there is a band of something that is not quite cloud sitting on the horizon with a hard bottom edge. You stop and look at it for a full minute. There is a version of this decision made on nerve, where you either bolt for shelter at the first strange light or push on out of pride. Neither is how it is done. It is done on evidence. How fast is the bottom edge moving against that far spur of rock? Is it climbing or holding? Is the light going yellow or going brown? Because those are different, and the difference is everything. What is the wind doing at ground level, not at cloud level? The edge is holding. The light is yellow, not brown. The wind has turned, but it has not risen. Dust, then, possibly a lot of dust in the next few hours, and unpleasant if it arrives while you are on open ground. But not the other thing, the storm that carries the basin's business up into the air and puts it everywhere, the one you shelter from without any argument at all. You look at the ground between here and the way station. 2.5 hours, most of it in the lee of a long ridge that will take the worst of any wind off your left side. You go on. You tie a cloth loosely round your face and hand one to your guard, who takes it and says nothing. And you cover the Brahmin's near eyes with the flaps that exist on the head harness for exactly this and no other purpose. The walking is worse after that. It always is, in dust, with your hat brim down, and the load creaking on a splintered frame, and the road ahead greying out to a smear at about 400 paces. But the way station is where it has been for years, and the ledger inside it does not care what the weather did. The way station is a low building with a wall around it that was somebody's fence line before it was anybody's wall. You can tell by the posts. They are set too far apart for defense and too close together for cattle, which means at some point in the last century, a person stood here with a plan that made sense to them. And then the plan stopped mattering, and the posts stayed. You bring the animals in through the side gate. The dust follows you a little way, and then loses interest. Inside the yard, there are 3 other outfits already settled, which is more than you wanted, and about what you expected, because everybody read that same sky, and everybody made the same arithmetic. The pens are shared. You put your 2 in the far corner, where the wind comes broken over the wall, and you check their feet before you check anything else, because their feet are the business, and you are not. Then you go in and stand at the counter and wait for the clerk to look up. He does not look up. That is not rudeness. It is procedure. He is finishing a line in a ledger that is open in front of him, and the line has to be finished before the next one starts. And if he lifted his head halfway through, he would have to redo it, and the company does not care about your afternoon. He writes to the end. He blots. Then he raises his eyes and asks for your number. Not your name, your number. Here is where the day stops being about Brahmin and dust and becomes about something much larger and much less visible. And it is worth slowing down for, because this is the part the road does not show you. You are not, in the way you might imagine, an independent operator. Almost nobody on these roads is. The image of the free trader, wondering where the profit is, answering to nothing but weather, is real, in the same way that a person who owns their own home outright is real. It exists. It is rarer than the stories suggest, and the people who have it mostly inherited it or spent 30 years getting there. What you are is closer to a subcontractor. The large caravan companies in this region are institutions in the full sense. They have offices. They have clerks like this one. They have standardized paperwork, route registries, warehouse space in the towns that matter, and enough capital to absorb a loss that would end you. The Crimson Caravan runs freight and hard goods across the whole Western trade network out of a compound near the Strip, with a hierarchy that goes from the family who own it down, through managers, down through contracted haulers, down to the people who actually walk. The gun runners are a different animal, a manufacturer more than a shipper, but they move product the same way, and they set terms the same way. There are smaller ones. The terms are not much better. What a company gives you is real. Access to the way stations, which means water at a fixed rate instead of whatever the desperate rate is that day, and a wall, and a pen, and a roof when the sky misbehaves. Standing with the buyers in the towns, because a buyer who cheats a company hauler has to answer to the company, and a buyer who cheats a loaner does not have to answer to anyone. A route, which is to say, permission to walk a particular road with particular goods without another outfit treating you as competition to be squeezed. Information, sometimes, though you have learned to weigh company information the same way you weigh a stranger's, and credit, which is the important one, and the trap. The Brahmin in the pen outside are not entirely yours. One of them is more or less, in the sense that the loan against her has been paid down far enough that you would keep most of the value if you sold her tomorrow. The other one is a good deal less yours than that. She was bought 2 seasons ago against a note held by the company, at a rate that the clerk who wrote it described as standard. And it is standard, and standard is not the same as generous. The note is serviced out of the route. That is the arrangement. A percentage of the declared value of every load you carry along a registered road comes off the top, before your costs, before your guard's wages, before the feed. Not a share of profit, a share of the load. Which means that on a bad run, where you sell at a loss because you misjudged a market, or because a settlement had already been supplied by somebody a day ahead of you, the company still takes its percentage of the goods you carried. The loss is entirely yours. The cut is not. This is not a scheme. Nobody set it up to ruin you. It is simply what capital does when it lends to somebody who has none, and it is the same arrangement that has existed in some form for as long as one person has owned a wagon, and another person has needed one. The company is not being cruel. The company is being an institution, which is a thing that does not have to be cruel to grind you, because grinding is what the mechanism does when the mechanism is switched on. The practical result is that you rent your independence. You have it for the length of the road, hour by hour, and it is genuine while it lasts. You choose the route. You set the prices at the stalls. You decide whether to walk through dust or sit under a wall. Nobody supervises any of it, and there is a real freedom in that which the clerks in the compound do not have and would not want. But the freedom terminates at the counter. Twice a month you are standing where you are standing now, giving a number to a man who does not need your face, and watching a figure move in a book you do not hold. The clerk asks what you carried. You tell him. He asks the declared value, and you give him a figure that is honest, because the alternative is a discrepancy. And a discrepancy is the kind of thing that gets a hauler's registration reviewed. And a hauler without a registration is a person with 2 Brahmin and no roads. He writes. He turns the ledger a quarter turn and puts his finger next to a line, and you sign it. You cannot read your own copy. Not because you cannot read. Because the copy is the second sheet, made through a layer of pre-war carbon that has been used past the point of usefulness, and half the figures come through as ghosts. You have asked before. The answer is that the ledger is the record, and the copy is a courtesy, which is true, and which tells you precisely how much weight your version of any future disagreement would carry. You fold it and put it in the inside pocket anyway. You always do. Occasionally the ghosts are legible enough to matter. There is a second set of hands in your business, and they wear uniforms. The Republic taxes this road, not by stopping you on it mostly, but through the way stations and the town markets, where a levy is assessed on registered freight and collected by people who work for the company and remitted onward to people who work for the government. It is not enormous. It is not nothing, and what it buys is real in a way that is easy to resent and hard to argue with. Because the reason you and your guard walked all morning without doing anything more strenuous than watching a ridgeline is that there are patrols on this stretch, and there are patrols because there is a state that has decided this stretch matters. Take the patrols away, and the levy goes away with them, and so does the price of goods in every town along the road, because the risk premium that would replace the tax would be several times the tax. You have done this arithmetic. Most traders have. It is the least popular conclusion on the road, and almost everybody arrives at it eventually. There is a complication, which is that the Republic pays its own soldiers and its own suppliers in paper, and the paper is worth what the Republic is worth, and the Republic is currently spending a great deal of itself on a dam 100 miles east of here. You are paid in caps by the settlements, and in a mix by the towns, and in company credit by the company. And reconciling those 3 things is a real part of the job that nobody warns you about. The exchange between them moves. It has moved against the paper for 2 seasons. So you hold caps where you can. Not out of any theory. Out of the observation that a cap has not changed what it is in anybody's lifetime, and a banknote is a sentence somebody wrote about the future. The clerk finishes. He tells you the balance on the note. You already knew it near enough, because you have been keeping it in your head all day, the way you keep the water level in your head. But hearing it said aloud by a man with no expression is a different experience from carrying it. It has come down. Not much. Enough. 4 more seasons like this one, and the second animal is yours outright. And then the percentage on the route drops to the registration rate. And then the margin on a day like today is nearly half again what it is now. That is the ladder. It is a real ladder. People do climb it. You know 2 who have, and 1 who was 3 months from the top when a herd took sick. He asks if you want water logged against the account or paid now. You pay now. Debt at the counter is how the small ones start. Then he looks back down and begins the next line. And you are done. And the transaction that will shape the next 4 seasons of your life took slightly under 6 minutes and required no conversation at all. Outside, the dust has thinned. The light is going long and orange across the top of the wall, and one of the other outfits is already repacking, which means they intend to make the town tonight and think they can do it before full dark. You look at your animals. You look at the road. You go and get the harness. The last leg into town is short enough that a stranger would call it easy, and long enough that you know better. 2 hours, maybe a little over, on a road that runs mostly downhill through broken ground, with the sun going down behind your right shoulder the whole way. Downhill is not free. Downhill means the load pushes forward into the straps every step, means the Brahmin walk with their necks braced, means you spend the whole descent listening to the packs shift and reshift, and wondering which knot you tied badly this morning in the cold, when your hands were stiff. The guard has changed his walk. He was on the high side all day, half a step ahead, watching the ground where the ground could hide something. Now he has dropped back level with you, because a road with this much traffic on it at this hour is safe in the way that a crowd is safe, and because the light is nearly gone, and there is not much point pretending to see what cannot be seen. He is thinking about being paid. You know this because you are thinking about paying him. You smell the town before you see it. Wood smoke first, and under the wood smoke, the sourness of a place where a lot of people live close together without enough water to be clean, and under that faintly cooking fat. Then a light, then several. Then the shape of a wall that is not really a wall, just the backs of buildings arranged so that the gaps between them can be closed, which is what most walls in the Mojave actually are. The noise arrives last, and it is the part that tells you where you are. All day you have heard your own footsteps, your own animals, one guard breathing, and at the settlement a handful of voices at a time. Here there are more voices than you can count, and none of them are talking to you. Somebody is arguing about a price 2 streets in. A generator is running badly somewhere, and nobody has fixed it because everyone has stopped hearing it. A door slams. A dog, or something that is doing the job of a dog. This is what a market town is. It is not a bigger settlement. It is a place with more than one seller in it, and that single fact changes every calculation you have made today. At the waypoint at the settlement this morning, you were the market. Whatever you had was the only version of that thing available, and the price reflected it. Here, there are 4 other outfits in the yard already, and a permanent stall row that has been open since noon, and a man who wants purified water can walk 60 feet and ask somebody else. Your leverage evaporated the moment you came through the gap in the wall. You knew it would. You came anyway, because leverage is not the same as volume, and a settlement of 30 people cannot absorb what 2 Brahmin carry, no matter how badly they want it. You take the pitch nearest the east side, because the east side gets the last of the light, and because the ground there does not hold water when the wind brings rain in off the hills. You have used this pitch before. There is no ownership in it, no reservation, nothing written down. There is only the fact that you were here in the spring, and the spring before, and the outfits that were also here remember it, and nobody has moved into it while you were unloading. That is what a claim is worth out here. It is worth exactly as much as the number of people who saw you make it last time. Unloading in the evening is a different job from loading in the dark. This morning, you were building a puzzle. Now you are taking it apart in front of an audience, and the audience is doing arithmetic while you work. 2 crates of ammunition coming down tells the whole row something about your capital. A pack that comes off light tells them you had a good day and are running out of stock, which is good for your price. A pack that comes off heavy tells them you are carrying something nobody wanted, and they will find out what it is before the hour is over. So you unload in an order. Water first, because water is what people come to look at, and you want a small crowd forming while your hands are still busy. Then the scrap electronics, laid out on the crate lid, spread wide so that a thin selection looks like a selection. Then the stim packs, which do not go on the counter at all, because anything that costs more than most people carry is better sold from under the crate on request. Putting a 100-cap item on open display in a market town is an invitation, and it also fixes the price in public, where you cannot move it. Under the crate, the price is a conversation. On the counter, the price is a fact. The pre-war luxuries go last, and they go at eye level, which is the whole trick. A tin of coffee that weighs almost nothing and takes up almost no space in a pack is going to earn more tonight than a full crate of scrap. And it earns it because somebody looks up while walking past and stops walking. Nobody has ever stopped walking for a crate of scrap. The first hour is slow, and the first hour is always slow. And knowing that does not make it feel any different. People are eating. People are finishing work. They walk the row. They look. They file it away. They go away and come back. 2 of them ask what the water is, and you say the price, and they say nothing and drift on, and both of them will be back before you close, because they were not shopping. They were surveying, the same as you would be. Then the row gets busy all at once, and stays busy for about 90 minutes, and that 90 minutes is the day. Everything else you did, the yard before dawn, the 4 hours of walking, the settlement, the broken pack frame you rewired with your knees in the dirt, the 2-hour detour around a bad reading, the way station and the ledger and the man who never looked up. All of it was set up for this. The road is not the business. The road is the cost of getting to the business. You sell water by the container to 2 families, and by the cup to a man who is not going to be able to afford the container this week. And both of you know he is going to keep coming back for cups, which is worse value for him and better margin for you. And there is nothing you can do about that, except not pretend it is a kindness. You sell the coffee tin to a woman who does not haggle at all, which almost never happens, and who pays in caps counted out of a cloth bag with the deliberation of somebody spending a decision she made 3 days ago. You trade a circuit board straight across for a repaired pack frame, better than the one you fixed today, and you take it because you are going to need it inside a month, and because the man offering it wanted the board badly enough that he brought it to you rather than making you find it. And then there is the buyer who waits. He has been at the edge of the row for a good while, and he is not browsing. He is a fixer of some kind, buying to resell inward, and what he wants is the ammunition. All of it, in one line. He came past an hour ago and asked the price and made a face and went away. He has come back now, which is not an accident, because it is late, because you have been standing for 15 hours, because your animals are unfed and standing in a pen you are paying for by the night, and because he can see the pitch next to you already breaking down. This is a technique, and it is not a secret. Every trader on the road knows it, and every trader on the road still loses caps to it, because knowing that fatigue is being used against you does not make you less tired. His offer is under what the ammunition is worth, and above what you will get by carrying it another 4 days. He has priced your exhaustion accurately. That is his whole skill, and he is good at it. You take about half of what he asks for, and give up about 1/5 of what you wanted, which is roughly where these things land when both people are competent, and you shake on it, and neither of you feels cheated, which is a different thing from neither of you being cheated. Here is the part that took you years to learn. The reason every trader arrives in the evening, knowing they will be squeezed for it, is that the alternative is arriving at midday and paying for a night you did not need, or camping outside the wall and paying with risk instead of caps. The road times itself. You leave the yard before dawn, because that is when the cold makes the animals willing, and the leg lengths are what they are, and a day's honest walking with loaded Brahmin puts you here at dusk, tired, in front of a man who has been resting since noon. Everyone in the market knows exactly what state the road puts a person in when it delivers them. The price of a thing in a market town at nightfall is not really the price of the thing. It is the price of the thing minus however much walking you did to bring it. You close the pitch out when the row starts to thin. Repack what did not sell, which is less than you feared and more than you hoped. Cover the crate. Then you pay the guard. You do it in the open, standing where the pen light reaches, and you count it into his hand a stack at a time. Out loud, the full figure agreed at the gate this morning, with nothing held back against tomorrow. He counts it again himself, which is correct and not an insult, and he says the number back to you, and that is the transaction. You do it in the open on purpose. A guard who has been paid short tells people. A guard who has been paid late tells people. And the next time you are standing at a yard gate at 4 a.m, trying to hire somebody who can walk 14 hours and stay awake, the only thing you have to offer that the outfit next to you does not is that everyone already knows what you do at the end of the day. Reputation out here is not a virtue. It is working capital. It is the cheapest thing you will ever buy, and the most expensive thing you will ever replace. He nods, and asks if you are heading the same way in the morning. And you say probably. And he says find him. And that is a contract too. Then you sit down on the crate you have been standing behind for 2 hours, and you count the day. And it is smaller than it felt. It always is. The 90 minutes of the market had the shape of a good night. Hands moving, people waiting, 3 separate conversations going at once. But the take is the take. Out of it comes the guard's wage, already gone. Out of it comes the pen fee for 2 animals and the bunk for yourself. Out of it comes feed, bought here at town prices because the settlement had none to sell. Out of it comes the percentage on the route and the season's portion against the animal, which you settled at the way station this afternoon, and which is not somehow separate from tonight, just because you have already paid it. What is left over is the day. It is a real number, and it is positive, and it is not large. That is a good day. You want to be clear with yourself about that, because there is a version of a trader who mistakes a busy evening for a profitable one and runs on that mistake for a year before the arithmetic catches him. Busy is not the same as ahead. You were ahead today by a modest, countable, honest amount, and you got there by walking 20-odd miles, reading a sky correctly, fixing a frame instead of replacing it, and losing an argument about ammunition to a man who was better rested than you. You put the caps in the strongbox. You put the strongbox where it goes. Then you go and see about the Brahmin, because they have not eaten since midday, and they did the actual carrying. The pen behind the boarding house holds 6 animals tonight, and yours are the 2 at the far end, nearest the wall, because you paid an extra cap for the corner, and the corner is worth it. Animals sleep better with something solid at their backs. So do people. You tip the feed into the trough and stand there while they eat, and for a few minutes you do nothing at all, which is the first time today that has been true. The near head lifts and looks at you and goes back down. The far head never stopped. You run your hand along the flank where the pack frame sits and feel for heat, for swelling, for anything that has changed since morning. Nothing has. The hide is dusty and warm and ordinary. You check the feet last, one at a time, lifting each in turn, and the animal allows it with the resigned patience of something that has had this done to it several hundred times, and has concluded that it is easier to permit than to argue. Then you go up. The bunk is in a room with 5 others and a window that does not open. There is a lamp on a shelf between the beds, oil, wick trimmed short, and you turn it up just far enough to work by. 2 of the beds are occupied already, and both men are asleep, and one of them is snoring in a slow, rhythmic way that you will stop noticing in about 10 minutes. You sit on the edge of yours with your back against the wall, and your legs still on the floor because you are not lying down yet, and you take out the ledger. This is the part of the day nobody imagines when they picture a caravan. The ledger is a pre-war accounting book with a stiff cloth cover and a great many pages, and roughly a third of them are still blank, and the ones that are not are yours going back 4 years. It was made to record something else. There is a printed header at the top of every page in small blue type, a column layout for a business that no longer exists, and you have ignored the layout entirely and written across it in your own arrangement, which is date, place, in, out, note. You write tonight's up while the numbers are still warm. That is the whole discipline, and it is not a small one. Numbers go stale. 6 hours from now, you will remember that the electronics moved well and the water moved slowly. But you will not remember that the water moved slowly at 14, and that you turned down 11 twice before you took 13 from the third man. That detail is the useful one. That detail is next month's price. If you wait until morning to write it, you will write down something plausible instead of something true. And a ledger full of plausible numbers is worse than no ledger at all, because you will trust it. So you write it out. Every line. The morning settlement, the barter that never touched a cap, the circuit board, and what it bought, and how long the food it bought will last. The way station percentage. The feed at town prices with a note beside it, because that is the second time this season the settlement has had no feed to sell. And twice is a pattern worth watching. The guard's wage, the pen, the bunk, the tick, and underneath, the note. Tonight's note is 3 lines, and it says the ridge road is passable. The well at the halfway settlement is running clean, and there is a man in this town who buys ammunition at a price you will not meet, and who knows it. You underline nothing. You do not need to. You will read this page again in 5 weeks when you come back through, and it will be the difference between an afternoon of guessing and an afternoon of knowing. Then you turn the page forward and start tomorrow. Tomorrow is a load planning problem, and you plan it from tonight's prices, because tonight's prices are the only real information you have. The market told you what this town is short of, and what it is sick of looking at. It is short of clean water, which it is always short of. It is sick of scrap electronics, because you brought a good deal of them, and so did somebody 2 days ago. So the electronics do not come back this way. The water does, if you can buy it cheap enough east of here, which you probably can, because east of here is where the purifier is, and prices always sit lowest, closest to the thing that makes them. You work it out on the page in a column of small figures. Cost to acquire, cost to carry, likely sale, minus feed, minus wage, minus the road. The margin is thin, and it is real. Thin and real is the whole business, and it only works if you leave before dawn. That is the last line you write, and it is the one that decides how the rest of the night goes. Not because the road is different in the dark, but because the buying is. The seller with the water has 3 traders coming, and will take the first offer that is not insulting. And the first offer belongs to whoever is standing in front of him when he opens. Being first costs you 2 hours of sleep. Being second costs you the margin entirely. You have made that trade before, and you will make it again, and you know exactly what it is. You are selling rest at a known price to a man who does not know he is buying it. You set the ledger down and turn the lamp lower. Outside, through the window that does not open, there is very little to see. A stretch of road, the corner of the pen, the shape of the animals against the fence, and under all of it, the road itself, which was here before any of this. It is worth sitting with that for a moment, because it explains more about your day than anything you wrote down. You did not choose this route. Nobody alive chose it. The road you walked today was surveyed by an agency with a name and an office and a budget, some time before the war, by people whose job it was to decide where a road should go. They walked the ground first. They measured grades and drainage. They picked this line over the line 4 miles north because of how water moves across the land in spring. And they were right. And they have gone on being right for 200 years without anyone knowing their names. They drew it. They filed it. They gave it a number and probably a designation with letters in it. And that number went into a book in a building. And the building is a foundation now, and the book is gone. And the road stayed. That is the thing about infrastructure. It outlasts the intention behind it completely. Every trader who walks this line is following a decision made by a committee that thought it was serving commuters and freight, and a country that would still be there. They imagined trucks. They imagined a certain volume of traffic at certain hours. They did their work carefully, on the assumption that the world they were building it for would continue, because that is the only assumption anyone can work on. None of them imagined you. Not one. Not a single person in that office, on the day they signed off on this alignment, pictured a man walking it beside 2 Brahmin with a ledger in his pack, pricing water by lamplight in a boarding house that used to be something else. That was not a failure of their imagination. It was simply outside it. They were doing their jobs. Other people in other offices were doing theirs, and that is the part worth being honest about at the end of a long day, because it is the truer half of the whole arrangement. The world you trade in was not a natural disaster. It was made. Somewhere, in a building with a lobby and a directory on the wall, people held meetings about it. They wrote memos. They approved budgets and revised timelines and worried about quarterly figures, and went home in the evening to their families. The decisions that produced the ground you walked today were made by people in chairs, and those decisions were documented meticulously, because that is what institutions do. There are records. There are always records. There are serial numbers and requisition forms and personnel files and inventory manifests, filed and cross-referenced and preserved better than anything else from that world. Immaculate records of everything except the people who would have to live in what they built. Nobody wrote your name down in advance. Nobody in any of those buildings put a line in a document reading. And in 204 years, a trader will walk this road, and here is what it will cost him. That line does not exist. It was never anyone's responsibility to write it. The whole enormous apparatus that produced this wasteland kept flawless account of its own machinery, and no account whatsoever of the ordinary future people who would inherit the wreck and have to make a living inside it. You make a living inside it. That is the other truth, and it stands on its own. What you did today was hard, and you did it well. You read a sky, and were right. You measured water, and did not run short. You repaired a frame with wire that you had thought to carry, which is a skill that looks like nothing, and is actually years of learning what breaks. You priced a stranger's goods in 4 seconds, and you were close enough. You held a route in your head that nobody wrote down, that lives entirely in walking it, and you handed some of that route to the page tonight, so that a version of you 5 weeks from now will be less tired than you were today. Nobody gave you that. You built it. It is genuinely yours, and it is genuinely difficult, and it is not diminished at all by the fact that you never agreed to need it. Both things are true. The competence is real. The choice was never offered. You turn the lamp down to nothing. The snoring goes on. The room settles. Somewhere below, through the floor, someone has left a radio running low, too quiet to make out. Just the shape of a voice, and then something with strings behind it, playing to nobody in particular, the way it has every night, for longer than anyone here has been alive. Outside, in the corner of the pen, one of the animals shifts its weight and is still